and we've got another episode for you this week. Please like, share, subscribe so you don't miss out on future episodes, and I hope that you enjoy this week's conversation. This episode will consist of topics around domestic abuse, domestic violence and sexual violence. If you require any support or help, please get in contact with your local domestic abuse, sexual violence organisation. In the UK, you can call the National Domestic Helpline on 0808 2000 247. And if you are listening overseas, please contact your national helpline where support, advice and guidance will be available for you. And hello everybody, and welcome to another episode with a conversation with. And this week I've got two incredible women that are my equivalents in the GP surgeries here in Surrey. So for those that are new, for those that don't know who I am East Surrey Hospital's domestic abuse practitioner. So I'm responsible for anybody that's coming in who or wants to have some advice around relationships, domestic abuse, and just some kind of case management stuff around domestic abuse. So my colleagues actually work in GP surgeries. So as domestic abuse practitioners, one of the difficulties nationally, not just locally, nationally, is intertwining the different agencies, because what we find is that agencies don't talk to each other. So whenever there is a high-risk domestic abuse case, it will go to something named as a MARAC, but what we find is that health can sometimes be missed off that list, and there isn't a good handover that's happening between the hospitals and GP surgeries. So I'm going to introduce you to Liz and Lucy, and they're going to tell you who they are, and then we're just going to have a conversation about what they do.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Shireen. So, myself and Lucy are Iris Advocate Educators. We are part of the Iris Project, which is it's a national project, and it's a social enterprise. The social enterprise nationally has been running, I think, for about 10 years, maybe a little bit more than that. But locally, we've been up and running in East Surrey, partnershiping with GP surgeries, kind of across Reigate and Banstead, and Tandridge for the past 8 years, and we're really excited because we're just about to partnership with 5 surgeries in the Banstead area. Iris came about in kind of a response to domestic abuse being a health issue, and kind of acknowledging really that kind of clinicians have such a key role in helping to identify domestic abuse that is kind of often kind of like a really hidden, can be a really hidden offence. But some of the health indicators can maybe give clinicians clues about maybe what's happening at home and kind of domestically for people. The project itself, Iris, is backed up by lots of research around health and the longer term impact of DA on survivors.
Great. So how many surgeries are you currently kind of covering, off the top of your head?
I think, I've just done a little count up, I think we are currently supporting 24.
Wow, that's amazing. And that's 24 surgeries in East Surrey, yes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Correct, yeah.
And do we know if there are Iris workers in GP surgeries in West Sussex or any other areas?
Yep, so Iris is a national project, okay. So it's quite hard, I believe, to get the funding locally for it, but absolutely they're up and down. Iris project is up and down the country.
And so you work in the GP surgery and I work in the hospital, and often those that are coming to the hospital are a crisis. They're very sick, otherwise they won't be coming to the hospital. How has the role kind of been responded to by health, your GPs and your health secretaries? How has that been, received?
Yeah, I think obviously, I think people are generally, really keen to partner with ourselves. They recognise that domestic abuse is a big issue, and they clinicians want to be able to refer, and they want their patients to have that kind of support. I think, the challenges come in where, obviously, GP surgeries have changed hugely since COVID. You hear lots on the news. People are under a lot of pressure. They're very sort of restricted in terms of their time. 10 minutes for an appointment, is really tricky for them, particularly if they're kind of like recognising DA, or even if they're to even just ask those questions around DA is time consuming initially for them. However, research tells us that it saves a huge amount of money. Also, it's a really quick and easy referral pathway for clinicians to us. And kind of, again, we know from research locally and nationally that kind of through support, kind of like those sort of health problems do sort of tend to go away once the DA is kind of explored and worked through and someone feels supported. So kind of longer term, those patients don't tend to have so much contact with their GP.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because, before doing anything to do with health, I was an outreach worker, and, I was very naive to, the different elements of, domestic abuse and health and those impacts. And I guess that, what we understood from an outreach perspective is that it takes an incredible amount of time before somebody has the bravery to talk about their experiences. Research says it's between 25 to 50 incidents of violence before they even report to the police, which is a considerable amount of time that somebody is dealing with, an abusive relationship before they seek the help. Yeah, and then, you've got the NICE guidelines, which basically say that every healthcare professional should be trained in DA because they're more likely to have that early intervention with somebody or that early opportunity to ask about DA rather than waiting for catastrophic injuries before they come to the hospital to be able to ask those questions. So have you been getting referrals from your GPs, and what are they coming in with? When the patients are coming in, what are they actually coming in with? Are they DA related health issues?
It's a real mixture. It's a real mixture of things. So, part of the Iris Advocator role is to train clinicians and to train administrators as well in surgeries. But with the clinicians, the training is really to get them to understand what DA is and to look for some of those health indicators, and look for some of the risks, because they're in a unique position because they're working with both, they're supporting both perpetrators and survivors. So sometimes they have some really kind of key information, but they don't always recognise and realise that they have that information. And I think kind of like the people come in for all sorts of reasons. So part of the training is to encourage clinicians to ask those key questions. And I think people go to the GP surgery. I think it's so different. So kind of like a patient may go to the surgery very specifically because they know that they are at risk, that there's stuff happening at home or within their family that they want to share with someone, and they see the clinician, the GP, as a safe person to go to. And then there's other people that kind of, go to, I was thinking of an example of someone who went to their GP because they were feeling really, really tired and fatigued. And she, the GP did lots of tests with her, nothing was coming up. So the GP said, can I just ask you, how are things at home? How's your relationship? And from that, the patient was able to share that actually her relationship was really quite difficult and that she was really quite stressed. that patient didn't see that as domestic abuse. She didn't realise that what she was experiencing was coercive control. And the GP was able to say, I think this is what you're experiencing, and I know somebody called Liz. Can I make a referral to her? Would you be happy to just meet up with her and chat with her? Yeah.
And what's your ages? Like, you know, because there's a preconceived idea that DA only happens to a certain cohort of society. And I've been amazed by the referrals that I've received at the hospital, because we've got equal amount of referrals under the age of 40 as well as the over the age of 40. So there is no clear defined cohort. What about within the GP? Is that the same?
So the referrals we receive are anything from the age of 18. I don't know, I think the oldest I have at the moment is 83. Traditionally, the IRIS model does attract more sort of maybe people from sort of ages 50 upwards, and maybe that age group feel more able to talk to their GP or more likely to go to their GP. Or maybe it's just that kind of they've been experiencing DA for so long that now they are really suffering from physical and mental health issues as a result of that domestic abuse.
Because I'm trying to, we'll have a discussion about, you know, safe ways. So when people leave the hospital, you know, often there's a discharge letter that's sent to the GP. And if it's known, you know, what GP surgery that is, and I happen to know that actually it's a surgery, you know, that you cover or Lucy covers, you know, I'm on the telephone to the surgery and I'm like, okay, I know that you've got an IRIS worker. I think that this patient would really benefit from having support from them, her, you know, so when those referrals are received, kind of what do you do with them? Like, so patients come into hospital, they've disclosed DA, they've been discharged, and then, you know, I've sent a letter or a referral to the GP surgery. So what happens from that moment?
Me.
Yeah.
So if the GP makes a referral to us, which as Liz mentioned is a really simple, like 2 or 3 questions they have to fill in, just some contact details for their patient. We can then contact the patient and talk through with them, find out what it is that they want help with, and then arrange to meet them, make sure that they're safe, and help them work through any actions that they want to take if they want to make any changes.
Okay. And is it time specific? Like, you know, do you have a certain time that you work with them? Like, are they open-ended? Kind of what is it that you do with them and for how long? Like, you know, I guess is my question.
Yeah, I mean, I think the lovely thing about our work is we can really respond to people's needs, and kind of, you know, whilst I would say it's open-ended, you know, I do have patients that I've worked with for a number of years now. Equally, there's some that I might only speak to a couple of times. So it's really led by them. Again, kind of the IRIS model nationally is that kind of IRIS advocate educators will, you know, work up to a year with somebody, and then the idea is that they then get referred into, so for ourselves is ESDAS, so back into sort of the general outreach of East Surrey Domestic Abuse Service.
And you mentioned, you know, something about, you know, that things have massively changed since COVID. Like, you know, I think that that's happened across society. And I know that a lot more people are having video consultations with their GP. How do you know, like, is this something that you're training your GPs about asking the safe question when you're in somebody's home via video and you don't know who's in the home?
Yeah, I think that's a real challenge, and a real challenge for you know, clinicians, and this is something that we kind of talk about quite a lot in our training, and in kind of team meetings and so on that we have with with the surgeries. What we would recommend is that if they suspect there is DA, that actually they don't have those phone and video conversations, that actually they ask them to come into the surgery, where they can obviously monitor the safety a bit more and actually see the person and ask those questions. And whilst they may be on the phone and they would hopefully ask, kind of like, is it okay to talk? Are you safe to talk? The acknowledgement is that some people will say yes they are, but actually really they're not, or they're on loudspeakers. So we really, really do encourage, clinicians to ask patients to come in. Obviously, it's a bit more tricky if DA is not known about. But again, if a clinician were to suspect that there might be DA, or maybe if they were to link some of those health, whatever it is that the person's come for example, we know that kind of gynecological problems are really high risk indicators of DA. So if they were talking to someone who maybe had kind of a series of infections, they might then be thinking, okay, I need to bring this person into the surgery, where it's a safe place to then kind of actually ask about kind of any other relationships at home.
I think it's a really exciting time, definitely for Surrey at this point, because, there is such an emphasis on supporting patients and people that are suffering with or dealing with the effects of domestic abuse, because you said it right at the beginning, domestic abuse is a health issue. It may not be just like, the physical punches, but it actually has an emotional and a psychological effect on somebody, stress, high blood pressure, IBS, gastro problems, mental health issues, and it must be, I find it encouraging that actually both services are being embraced by health to be able to go, we don't have that time, we don't have that expertise, come in and do your thing in order to, really benefit the patients. Are you seeing any, real effects of your intervention with the clinicians, be that you're getting more referrals or they're asking more questions, or even with your, patients,
Yeah, I think, kind of like when you see kind of patients' journeys and kind of, their starting point with us and where they end up, there's amazing transformation that kind of happens for them. And that's obviously very, very varied and and different, depending on someone's circumstances. But there was one particular patient that I worked with who, the GP herself has sort of said, that this patient was really malnourished, and she had suicidal ideation, and kind of just through the work that we did with her and were able to do with her. I mean, the GP hadn't seen her for a number of weeks, and when she did see her, she said, I don't know what you've done with her, but she looks completely different. She looks physically healthy. She's talking much more positively. And this particular woman did actually manage to safely leave the relationship. Obviously it's not always like that. Yeah. And there's times when, things don't come together quite that easily. But I think, there's a real beauty in working together with health services, because DA is complex. And as we've mentioned, it is a hidden offence. And it has massive health implications for people. So the more we can work together and understand each other's roles and support each other, because ultimately we want the best health-wise for patients.
Thank you both so much for taking the time to kind of have a conversation with me. I hope that the 5 surgeries that you've just got the funding for turns to 10 surgeries, and we get a whole little team of you behind us. But thank you for joining me. Until next time. And you've just listened to this week's episode. I hope that you've enjoyed the conversation this week. Feel free to like, share, subscribe so you don't miss out. And I'll see you next time.